Good evening and welcome to the Greenfield Public Schools School Committee meeting for Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. Member Deneve, would you call the roll call, please?
Yes. Secretary Deneve, I'm here. Vice Chair Martini. Is she virtual?
She is. I see her here.
Okay. Chair Johnson-Musad.
I am here.
Mayor DeSorger. Member Goodwin. Here. Member Childs.
Here.
Member Sexton.
Here.
All right. We are all here except for Mayor DeSorger.
All right.
I am here.
Thank you, Catherine. I had you on mute, so you didn't hear anything that was happening. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for those joining us from home, and thanks for your patience with some audio issues we're working on today to have some folks able to attend remotely. So the meeting was called to order at 6:07 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by GCTV. If any other persons present are also recording, you must notify the chairperson at this time. I don't see anybody. So we're I'd like to take a motion to adjust our agenda to put the report of student representatives to the committee first. Is there someone who could make that motion?
So moved.
Motion.
Seconded.
All right, motion from Ann Child, second from Stacy Sexton. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion looks unanimous to me, so we will hear now from our student representatives. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the motion for allowing us to go first. We appreciate it. So beginning first with Student Council, the Student Council attended the Regional Student Council Conference on April 24th. Auburn, Mass. was elected the vice president for all of student councils in Western Massachusetts. This month, we'll be replacing flags in preparation for Memorial Day at local cemeteries, celebrating Teacher Awareness Week, and holding class officer elections as well as e-board elections. We also met with incoming principal Mr. Browning to review concerns and hopes for the next school year.
Key Club just finished a very successful reading project, reading to students at AEL and spending some quality gym and playground time, as well as distributing books to the YMCA, Learning Knoll, Hillcrest School, and Head Start students. They are planning another children's literacy event in May, as well as a field day for AEL.
Spring sports have 3 weeks left in their regular season. As of April 26th, the state rankings are as follows. Baseball ranked 34th at 2-6 with 10 games left. Softball 11th, 6-1 with 11 games. Girls tennis is 16th, they're 3-1 with 11 matches left. Western Mass playoffs start May 19th and state playoffs start May 29th with state finals happening June 14th through 15th. Boys and girls track and field PVIC is Saturday, May 18th at Mohawk, with states being May 23rd through 25th. Boys track is 3-0 and girls track is 1-2. Both have 3 meets left. You can get all the schedules on Arbiter Live, and we hope to see you at a game soon.
25 GHS students, staff, and parents had a very successful trip to France during April break. They look forward to more educational field trips at home and abroad in the future. French Club prepares for their Spring Coffeehouse Talent Show tomorrow night, Thursday, May 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. in the GHS Auditorium. Admission is $5 and refreshments are included. Lastly, in partnership with the French Department of Frontier and Hopkins, GHS welcomes a group of high school students from Nantes, France, who will be learning about American culture and creating international connections during home stays in our community through May 12th. AV Club is currently on break until Mr. Carlino returns from paternity leave. Spectrum recently designed and ordered their t-shirts to wear in their Franklin Country Pride Parade in June. This month, they will also be celebrating their senior members and preparing for the parade and rally.
And then student representatives, the ones present at the table, have held 2 meetings with administration regarding the content of the student reports with a fixation on the discussion of bathrooms. Conversations have occurred in an effort to gain a mutual understanding of the ongoing issue at our school within the building, one that impacts the safety and security of students when using the facilities. Such meetings have been organized to address a separation in administrative and student understanding, and we hope that they will be a continued means of administrative involvement in the future as a means to receive the direct voices and opinions of students. That concludes our report today. It's pretty brief, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Have a good night. Okay, we'll move to our vote to enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. The committee will return to open session. We have a motion to enter into executive session for that reason.
So moved.
A motion from Secretary Deneve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Sexton. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Secretary?
Secretary Geneva, I'm a yes. Vice Chair Martini is virtual.
Yes.
Okay. Chair Johnson-Musad,
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger,
Yes.
Member Goodwin,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Member Sexton.
Yes.
It is unanimous.
Okay, we will go to open session and we will return. For us to start, we don't have, we do have everyone home. All right. Okay, welcome back. We are back from our executive session. And now I would hear a motion to approve the contract for BOE IT employees.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion from Member Sexton and a second from Mayor DeSorger. Any discussion? I'd just like to publicly thank the team that worked on this, the administration, and Stacy Sexton represented this school committee well in these negotiations, and it sounds like everyone came in good faith and worked cooperatively, so we love that. And so I would, let's call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Member Martini, do you want to?
Aye.
Oh, okay. And I will abstain, and the motion carries. Unfortunately, with Member Goodwin out of the room, unfortunately, but the motion carries. So let's see. We will move on to reports of the administration, and I believe that Andy Paquette will be joining us by speakerphone.
All right, Andy, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so you have in your packet, we're on the home stretch here. So our monthly report of the local budget and the revolving accounts. We are continuing to go through year-end closing and journal entries. We're reviewing all encumbrances to make sure that we've got everything encumbered. There will be some encumbrances coming for some normal year-end expenditures that, we're just getting final numbers on that will ultimately increase the encumbered amounts. And payroll is also going through and doing another review to ensure that we have all our, encumbrances for the summer pays for those that get paid over the summer. And we'll be doing some reclasses, potentially if you look at the revolving accounts as of right now, the only one with a quote unquote, I say deficit is the pre-K tuition. And that could be, again, looking at the revenues. We're just reviewing to see if we've got more revenues outstanding that we're going to collect. But if need be, we have the funds available to address that through whether it be another revolving account or reclassing expenditures back to the local fund. Similar to what we've done when there's been a deficit in the athletic revolving account. With that said, I can answer any questions that anyone might have.
Yes, Member Goodwin.
Andy, I just have a couple questions because I didn't know what those numbers meant, and the math teacher in me likes to know what numbers mean. So there was, at the end, the year-to-date on page 8, it just says business administration, 234,871. I just didn't know what that was.
Right, that is the staff of the assistant business manager, the accounts payable person, and the 2 people in the payroll office.
Okay, and then another question about the vans, which, so I read the warrants, and one of the bills was to replace a water pump in the Honda. So the Hondas, as I drove a Honda for 20 years, so it's only got 25,000 miles on that van. Didn't it come with a warranty when those things were bought?
I would have to review that.
It's $1,300 for a new water pump, and that was the bill. And I was like, most Hondas, it's 100,000 miles before you have to pay anything. So that was just one of my questions. And then, so I'm looking at transportation, like you're paying $400 a month to transport a child to Springfield, and I've held those van doors, and I've done that. But couldn't one of our vans have done that? I mean, is somebody really looking at the efficiency of our vans versus paying another company to transport kids?
So what I can tell you is that, well, go ahead, Andy.
No, you can start. I'll fill in if I don't agree.
You'll agree. The day-to-day scheduling of our vans is overseen by the transportation coordinator. So any runs that can be done by our fleet are done by our fleet. Depending what the bill is, and I don't know specifically, and obviously we don't want to talk about specific children, but at times we are transporting students under McKinney-Vento, which often, or there always should be a cost share situation. So the warrant wouldn't reflect the offset from another district if that's the case. But I can tell you with certainty that we are using our fleet to address the fiscal pieces. So if we are paying to transport, that's because for whatever individual reason, that was the most effective way to get the student transported.
So you're the only person who really knows this, you and Andy. Are the vans making money for us?
Oh, Andy can tell you that quite clearly. But before he says his answer, I will tell you, as part of the strategic plan, one of the pieces was going to be an evaluation of the transportation structure that we have in terms of the internal transportation, and then we had a change in coordinator. So we've not asked the new coordinator to do that yet. She's still getting the lay of the land, but that is part of the strategic plan. So Andy, do you want to give her the answer?
Was it the question about are our vans making money for us?
That is the question.
Yes. I have to admit, honestly, yes, and I was somewhat surprised. We've seen a steady increase over the years as to the revenue that the transportation program is generating. So if you look last year, on the transportation revolving account, we had 265,000. As of May 6th, we've collected $310,410.38. Tripping over my tongue there. So it is generating revenues to offset the overall transportation program. And if you were to look at the trends, it has been consistently increasing over the years since, I guess the vans were bought prior to our arrival. So
Yes.
like 3 years,
They're 5 years
it's been
old.
steadily increasing as to their revenue generated.
So you think even with the salaries of the drivers and the insurance and parking them someplace, and that, they're now 5 years old, so,
It's never going to be a self-supporting program when you look at the total cost for it, which would be pretty. We'd have to charge the districts that we are currently providing services to. They would end up going elsewhere looking for
okay.
their transportation providers from what it is that we're doing. So, but it's that's not out of the norm for we do have as much as I hate to use the word hybrid, a hybrid approach of providing our own transportation and contracting out what it is that we can't provide. So when you look at the total funding sources for our transportation and the transportation, both regular ed, special education, it's it covers not doesn't cover half of it, but for what it does cover, we'll say that it's increasing.
Okay. Just thinking the future, because they're getting older.
Well, that's why we have that analysis of the transportation
Yeah.
structure as part of the strategic plan. Obviously, it won't be done this year, but it is part of the five-year plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions for, oh, yes, let's see, go with Secretary Deneve and then the mayor.
Hi, Andy. I had two questions, just because I was wondering if you could just tell me what the line item means. On page 8, the second to the last one above the school committee, it just says contracted service. But could you just tell me what contracted service that covers, just so that I know in the future when I'm looking at this?
Sure, that is the contract for our services.
That's the TMS services line?
Correct.
Okay. And then the other one, and that's 148,320, correct? Like, we're looking at the same thing?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other one that I wanted to ask about is on page 7, and it's the same question. I'm just not 100% sure what it means. Contracted professionals or professors, it just says PROF, and that's $229,570. So I'm just wondering, so I know in the future what that means.
Sure. That's a combination of medical, therapeutic, OT, PT, speech services. Those are the special education providers that provide our, instead of the staff, if we have to go out for specialized contracted services for medical, therapeutic, that's what that primarily is.
Okay,
That's
great.
actually all that is.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mayor?
Hi, Andy. I have a couple of questions. While we're on this page, I have one that I want to know. On page 7, it's about 7 or 8 down. What is administration for $310,224? It's under school lunch.
The special education, the director of special education, the assistant director of special education, and the sped chairs, or I forget what the team
ETLs,
leaders,
yeah, ETLs.
Yeah. ETLs, yes, sorry, thank you.
I have 3 more. Is that okay?
Yep, you have the floor.
What is your order of spending What do you spend down first? Grant, capital, operating?
Well, the grants, most of our grants are written for specific expenses, so we have to spend the grant in accordance with what the grant was written for. So it's kind of a two-pronged, I'd say that's a unique thing. So we use the grants for, and yes, we do amend grants if there's a potential change in plan that we'd be allowed to do, but they're pretty much written and we adhere to the grant plan as was written. There are parameters regarding, for example, circuit breaker. Circuit breaker, we're required to spend at least the prior year balance that we received, the amount that we received. So we have to spend that. And then, the local budget, we again adhere to our plan for a local budget. But again, with just a quick history, with ed reform, school committees were provided significant flexibility as far as the use of their fund because of the value that the Ed Reform Act of '93 placed on education. Kind of stating the obvious, but so we end up using the funds, and that's why even though we see negatives, there's a balance at the end, but that balance is going to be eliminated with our end of the year spending that hasn't been encumbered yet and dealing with potential deficits, as I alluded to earlier. And we'll be looking and reevaluating if there are things with that balance that we need that we had to either cut or that would help out for the future, as allowed by ed reform.
Thank you. And we have to vote on, every time when we do the budget, we have to vote on revolving fund balances. Do you, revolving fund spending limits. Do schools need to do that, or there's different regulations? I just honestly have no idea.
I would like to think when the revolving accounts are voted on, I believe education revolving accounts are included in what the city would vote. Mm-hmm. But there are no balance. The only limitation regarding some of the revolving accounts, specifically building use, obviously its title tells you what it is that it can be used for, to offset expenses for any organizations that use the building. School choice is used, it's the definition of the school choice revolving account says that it's used to educate those students that are taking part in the Greenfield Public Schools through the school choice program. Can be used for salaries, which we do use it for. Circuit breaker, again, that's the one that really has the restriction of you cannot carry over more than the prior year receipts that you have to spend at least the prior year receipts amount that were received and carry over no more. Anything that if you were to carry over a balance more, any balance above that would get turned over to the town or the city.
Thank you. Okay, last one, and this one I certainly don't need the answer to today. This is on the capital expenditures, and so you may have to look it up for the next time. On the high school, when the high school was built, it looks, from looking at this one, and I'm not sure, that there's $185,000 left, and and the reason I'm asking about it is because I went to watch a baseball game, and they were asking me about the lights, and we've set aside $20,000, I think, for lights, and if they're LEDs, which are more efficient, it's going to cost a couple of $100,000 to put lights on Vets Field, which that's what I would like it to be. I've talked to Carol to see if there's something, if there's any kind of grants for that. But I did see that there was Vets Field improvements used there, so I just wanted to put a bug in people's ear or ask about that. This is on page 5 of the capital, of the things that we borrowed for. So it would be at the high school, and it looks like the whole amount wasn't expended. I didn't know if it was, that's what happens with our capital projects. Sometimes we have retained things and we can repurpose it And so I was just wondering, maybe for the next meeting, if you could check, and maybe I'm off base.
I would like to check though, because the line that was identified for Vets Field improvement was fully expended
Okay.
on this, but I'd like to see if we can figure out what that was.
I think solar wasn't. I think perhaps solar wasn't, but I just was looking at it, knowing that there was another energy efficiency, perhaps, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I thought I would just mention it.
So that's probably a good history for us to review, because the Andy and I and
If I may.
you may,
I may-
let me put you back
the,
under the mic.
The thing that would need some research, I have, that money was used with MSBA borrowing and debt exclusion vote. So obviously, any use of that would have to be in line with what the debt exclusion vote was. So I would say we would just need to recommend that the city would check with either bond counsel or legal counsel as to whether or not, if we're talking, and I apologize, Mayor, are you thinking about potentially using it for lights?
Well, it wasn't actually, it was just a discussion item. I know that people have asked me, they've come into the office and asked me about lights, and then there were some people came in and said, if we did that real quick, we wouldn't have to buy those energy efficient ones, which I would prefer to buy the ones that were better for the environment.
My recommendation would be, though, that whatever is decided, you would just want to run it by bond counsel to see as to whether or not it would fall in line with the debt exclusion vote, because any vote, if you're going to repurpose funds that were voted via a debt exclusion, it has to be for a comparable project in line with what the debt vote was.
And is that something everyone is supposed to agree on? Andy, do you know that?
Can you repeat the question, Mayor?
Is that something that everyone's supposed to agree on, or how does that work? I can save that for I'll save that for later.
Okay.
Again, that's a legal counsel question as to whether or not, quite honestly, as far as like the authority to repurpose it, I would think would have to go at a minimum to city council, but I very easily could be wrong on that. So again, not being an attorney, I would recommend asking legal counsel as to whose authority it is to repurpose that.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Member Goodwin.
Okay, Andy, you've been doing our books for quite a few years now. So are our sped costs, like what percentage do you think they're going up?
What percentage do I think they're going up as far as from 24 to 25, or?
Yeah, like every year, are they going up? Is there a pattern to this? Do you see a pattern?
Oh, no, it's very hard to say a pattern when some of our tuition costs, which are the biggest ones, are dictated by the OSD rate setting.
Okay.
Where previous year was 14%. This year we're at like 6 and change, I believe is what they said. And then we have the standard, I'll say the transiency of the ins and outs of the population. But I mean, I can do a quick look and see as far as what we're looking at for overall special education. If you just give me a second here.
I think some of the other factors that are going to challenge looking at any pattern is staffing. That has,
Correct.
we've had staffing challenges, especially since the pandemic.
Yep.
So I think that's going to be a challenge in looking at any kind of consistent expenditures. Yeah, like our contracted services are going to definitely be representing the fact that we've had a hard time getting school psychs. So we've had to contract, which is, on the whole, going to be much more expensive than hiring a staff person. Okay. So some things are not apples to apples, I guess I would say.
Post-pandemic costs.
So here's an example. I mean, when you look at the trends, we've had from 21 to 22, the overall actual expenditures in special education in the local budget went down $700,000, but the use of other funding sources increased. So it was about level 22 to 23. We saw a significant increase of 1.1 million. 23 to 24, we are down in our local, but we are increasing because of, again, with the funds available. When you get an increase in circuit breaker, that means we need to use more of that to do so. And projecting for 24 to 25, when we look at, we saw some students aging out or moving out. We're looking at an overall 9% decrease in our special education in total. But as Christine, that's as of right now. That could very easily change, and we see those fluctuations. The number of times that we have met with Mr. Messing to go over changes that we've had to make in his budget for the year because of whether it's increased needs of services that weren't budgeted for. It's been regular, we'll say.
Okay, so here's the big question. You have some amazing human beings sitting here who went to Boston to meet with legislatures to fight for the schools. Where do you think the fight is money-wise? Is it special ed cost? Is it transportation? Is it, additional funding for the homeless? Where would the best bang for the buck go if we're talking to
I'm going
legislators?
to say yes, 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 and yes.
Okay.
All kidding aside, but without being glib, but I'm going to say that the biggest, every year it comes up with the fact that, whether it's the circuit breaker and or even, quite honestly, at the federal level, the IDEA legislation was supposed to be for 100% reimbursement for special education costs.
You lied.
That has never occurred. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I'm going to be very cynical. I don't think it ever will. And that's where, one of the things that I say, when I do these trainings with school committees and administrators, it's all well and good to be talking about the foundation budget formula and all these things as far as net school spending, required local contribution. But when time comes for the budget development process down in Boston, all the rules go out the door. There's no penalty if they say, there's never been a penalty about fully funding circuit breaker. Every year we're budgeting at 70%. We're lucky if we get it up to 75%. So it's things like that where, and I'm just all kidding aside again, but I would say, keep advocating for all of it. Okay. Because sooner or later, similar to what happened with the Student Opportunity Act, there was enough, hue and cry over it. And then once they started to do the research, it said, yes, we need to do another adjustment to our funding for education. That's, I'm going to say, just we need to keep doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the Assistant Superintendent's report. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. I'm hanging up now. All right.
Good evening, everyone. Updates on professional development. We have one more half day on May 24th for our PD session, last one of the year. We've been continuing our work with the teaching lab and our instructional strategy work. We are going on walkthroughs this week, our last walkthrough of the year with all 6 buildings. We will again share that data and plan our last professional development with faculty meetings that are ending the school year, along with collaboration. Teaching lab will be on site on May 24th. Investigating history, we've been working with EduCurious and Nadine Ekstrom, and she will be coming May 24th to finish up with the PD she's been providing to our middle school history teachers on the new curriculum resources that we've adopted this year. And our high school math teachers will continue to get their ongoing support in illustrative math. Their last session this year is called Enhancing Access, and that will take place also on that PD day. Some curriculum updates with regards to civics. Miss Zimmerman, our 8th grade history teacher, took our kiddos to Old Sturbridge Village, where they got to attend an 1830s town meeting. I shared a photo from the day. The kids were very excited to go back to Old Sturbridge Village, and I love sharing photos with all of you so you can see what they get to experience. They did have to debrief and write some reflections when they returned, and I got to read a few of them, and it was nice to see that not only did they think it was educational, but they had a really good time and thought it was fun. And then Title I has funded some field trips, and we took our 3rd and 4th graders from every elementary to the new Greenfield Public Library, and really want to thank the children's librarian there. She provided a great tour, did a scavenger hunt with our kids, so they got to explore the whole library. They had a fabulous time, and you'll see that some of our Newton Elementary students, they shared their photo with me of how much fun they had at their scavenger hunt. Title I also tries to keep reading and math the focus when students are on vacation so that they're continuing their learning, and they always sponsor a challenge over April vacation. Everyone who participates gets a little gift, and then we do a raffle for students by grade level, and they either got a Roundabout Books gift certificate this time or a Magic Wings gift certificate to go to the Butterfly Museum. So some of our very happy Federal Street Elementary School prize winners are shown here. And then just lastly, as Christine and I continue our transition planning and our roles shifting here, I've begun to meet with 3 high school student groups already thus far. I spent the day at Greenfield High School, and today I spent the day with Newton Elementary folks, and I will continue to do that. It's just been a really great experience thus far, just getting feedback from folks. Really proud of all the work that we've done and started, and they're really excited to see where we're going to continue with the transition being smooth since we've been together for so long. So it's just a really good day. I'm also going to try to include some family and student community groups, and those are to be determined. I just haven't picked times and places, but I'll get that information out as well. And that's it.
Thank you. Let's hear for the superintendent, and then we'll get questions for both of you.
Okay, so first I'd like to make sure that we all know that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I know that our buildings have had some nice activities provided from PTOs, from some of our administrators, trying to somehow reflect the level of gratitude and appreciation that we have in all of our educators. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and I would also like to add to that all of our staff have the opportunity to educate our students and have a positive impact, and we appreciate all of them. The other special thing for today is that it's actually National School Nurse Day. So our school nurses are being celebrated within Teacher Appreciation Week. So that's also a wonderful thing. We're very fortunate to have a full complement of school nurses at this point, and they do a wonderful job with our students. So we in Greenfield are extremely proud of the staff here and know the positive impact that they have on our students. Speaking of staff, not teachers, but we have some administrative updates that I'm very happy. I'm announcing them because I can, but they're going to be Karen's administrative team. So Destiny Meeker will be joining us at Four Corners. She is taking Mike Browning's spot. You folks might remember that Mike is moving up to the high school effective July 1st. Destiny is coming to us from the Hoyle Public Schools, and she was able to be at Four Corners this afternoon at the staff meeting to meet the staff and interact with them a little bit. Sadie Cora will be taking over as principal of Newton School effective July 1. Darlene is moving into our 504 coordinator position, which we're very pleased to have. And Sadie is also coming to us from the Hoyle Schools, so we're happy about that. And she was also at Newton this afternoon to meet with the staff. You're seeing a pattern. That was planned. And then Mr. Morrison has moved his last day in Greenfield to May 17th. So Roland Joyle, who is a veteran administrator, he was the principal of Chicopee High School for 18 years and then an executive director at the Lower Pioneer Valley Collaborative, will be moving into the interim position at the high school for the last month of school. Roland has actually been serving us as an interim middle school associate principal since February and loving it here. And so despite the fact that he would have been quite happy to finish out at the middle school, he did agree to move to the high school. Having a veteran principal step in will allow him to take care of the logistical work as we close out a high school year, including the logistics of graduation. And that will allow Gina Johnson and Michelle Gould, our associate principals, to keep supporting our kids and focusing on that instead of having to worry about some of the day-to-day operations. So I think it's a good option to ask him to fill that role for us. Speaking of graduation, all the school committee members had at your spot a copy of your graduation and senior awards night invitation. So please let us know if you'll be able to join. And I'm very happy to share that we will be hosting our graduation on Saturday, June 1st at 10 a.m. in the Greenfield High School auditorium. And as I shared with families and staff yesterday, Gina Johnson has agreed to deliver the graduation speech for our class. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for them to hear from her, an administrator who's been with them for the past 3 years, and she's very much looking forward to it, and I appreciate her willingness to step into that. I accidentally, in all my excitement to share that Gina was going to do the graduation speech, accidentally mentioned that graduation was June 3rd. It is not. It is June 1st. So I apologize for that little mistake. The budget, Karen and I attended the Ways and Means budget discussion that was held somewhere at the end of April. And we shared the same budget presentation that night that you folks saw when I did the superintendent's budget presentation. We answered some questions, and at this point, to the best of my knowledge, Mayor, we're waiting for the City Council to deliberate and vote on a budget. So.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Yes, Member Deneve.
I would just like to thank you, Karen, for all of the photographs that you include in your updates. We're so far removed from the students' lives, so getting to see that makes it really worthwhile for us.
You're welcome. I'm big on photos, and staff always cringe when I'm around because I usually am like, smile. So I'll start sharing more of them as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, thank you. I just need to find my agenda. I think I found it. We're on to our consent agenda, and I think, just in case, I know we have at least one relatively new member, the consent agenda offers us the opportunity to vote on a batch of things that are sort of pro forma at the same time. However, if anyone wishes to take any item out of the consent agenda and vote on it and discuss it separately, we can do that. So first, is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the list of consent agenda items? Not hearing any. I'd hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All right. And so, any discussion? Yes, Member Sexton.
I just had a quick question about what's happening with the picnic tables after we declare them. Just where are they going?
Well, so first of all, I will share they were purchased in FY21, and they were purchased with the first round of COVID money, the COVID relief fund, and most of us administrators at the schools didn't know that they were where they are, and so the mayor actually identified that they were on some city property. And so what happens once the committee declares them surplus, let me share, we're not declaring all the picnic tables surplus. The schools will retain some. Primarily, we have some toddler-sized picnic tables and some handicapped accessible ones that we'll definitely retain. And there are others at schools already that we're keeping. So when the school committee declares any items surplus, the first thing that we do is share that information with all other city departments who, if they are interested, reach out to mention that they would like to take the property that has been declared surplus. So unless I'm completely and totally off the mark, which I don't believe I am, I think that the city will take them and use them rather than purchasing new picnic tables. So, yeah.
Great. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All right, let's vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And I'll abstain. So the motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are close to the end of our policy review process that's been happening for almost more than 5 years. And so I'm very excited to say that we have some, I had the motion all set up in my computer, but now it's going to require a password, which is hard for me. So give me just a second. I can find these relatively quickly. All right, so we're going to take each section of the first read at a time. And Superintendent, I know you have some items that are school committee policies where we may, we get to think about whether we want to retain that policy at all. So if you can flag for those those for us in the discussion, that would be great. So the motion, I'd like to hear a motion that we approve the first reading of amendments to Section H, negotiations, as presented.
So moved.
Motion from the mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from Member Goodwin. Any discussion? Superintendent.
Just for clarification on this first section, you'll see 2 copies of policy HF, school committee negotiating agents. The one that is marked up, the first draft, I am recommending that the committee delete and adopt the second version. The reason for this primarily is that the Greenfield original version was voted in 2006. The second version is an updated MASC draft from 2022, and Liz LaFond, who is here, our MASC rep, confirmed for me that no additions or updates have been made since 2022 on this through MASC, so that is a current policy for your consideration.
Great, thank you. And so I think we can assume that the document as presented is making that recommendation, and thank you, Superintendent, for clarifying that was the intent of the document. Is there any discussion on this section? Not hearing any. Well, let's call for a vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain, so it passes. Next, we will move on to, I would like to hear a motion that we approve the first reading of amendments to Section K, Community Relations, as presented.
So moved.
Motion from the mayor. Is there a second? Oh, there is? Member Goodwin. Okay, sorry, didn't hear you. All right. Superintendent, any comments on this section?
I believe there will be. Primarily, the general format, if you don't remember from all the other 100 sections prior to this, is that there are generally a Greenfield prior drafted section, and then if there is an MASC version of the policy, it follows. most of the time, the language is fairly similar, but generally MASC had updated statutory language and any legal changes that have been required since our policies were adopted generally in 2006, if not exactly that year. So for the most part, the deletions recommended are deleting the outdated Greenfield draft and then adopting the current MASC draft. I'm going through, I did recommend removal of regulation. Policy is the school committee's belief about what should happen. Regulation is how I'm supposed to make it happen. Regulation almost every time is not included in a policy manual, with the exception of the concussion protocol that's required to be in policy. I also took out some notes that were in there from MASC, such about why particular language changes were made. I just want to make sure I had no outstanding questions from the committee, for the committee, I apologize. I apologize. I don't think so in this version. No. So anything that's redlined are the changes, no outstanding questions for the committee.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Member Goodwin?
I guess, when I read it, and I've been reading a lot of policy as a new committee member, I just was struck by everything that was, the wording about inclusiveness was all red inked. And then when I read the newer version, I just wanted a statement of inclusion that was, and I don't know if it's somewhere else and I just haven't read that piece. So like on school parent relations goals.
Can you tell me what the letters are?
KBA. So
Yes.
it's very different, I guess is where I'm at.
The MASC version is very different than the
Right.
Greenfield version?
Right. I mean, I've read them multiple times and I would have printed it out, but my printer and I are having issues. So, it's like it's encouraged instead of, it's a little more, yes. I think one of the things I know about the people in this room is we're all about inclusiveness and basically making sure that parents are included. So it just can't, one reads very strong and the other is not quite so strong. As a reader, I just was like, one says something really strong and the other doesn't. And I'm fine with the other because it's more legalese, I guess, and that's what this is supposed to be. So the second one, the KBBA.
A different,
Right. So it's all, there's all red stripes through it. So is there another
Okay.
document that replaces that?
yep, the following policy.
Okay.
So the
Got it.
language of KBA,
KBBA.
well, I guess I'm going back to her first comment about, if there's, as we've done with every other section, if there's language
Right.
that you want to have the policy subcommittee, of which you are a newly elected member, consider.
Will be later in the meeting.
Oh, I apologize. Let the cat out of the bag. Which you may be a newly elected member to. That's the point of the subsequent policy subcommittees. It's your choice around language. But KBBA, the first was the antiquated Greenfield version from 2006.
Okay.
The second identical KBBA is the updated MASC version. So
Okay.
there is a following version of the policy.
And I respect that completely, because I know that lawyers are involved with what is written.
Absolutely.
And that's what I like.
Yep.
So, okay,
So just to clarify, the KBBA, the non-custodial parents' rights, that is all based on law. That's not our
Okay.
preference, that's the
so
requirements.
this, everything that is being updated has been,
It has been reviewed by MASC, recommended, and then in any place where there were questions, and sometimes when there weren't questions, but just particularly legal-heavy policies, they were reviewed by our legal representatives as well.
perfect, thank you.
Any other discussions on section K? Yes, please, Member Sexton.
Well, this is more of just some of them are red highlighted and not red stricken out, and I was wondering if that means the same thing.
I'm just looking at one that's highlighted red. Yes, I believe it was just
Okay.
whether I highlighted and hit delete, or did the recommended deletion in a different order of things. Sometimes the editing functions were a little wonky.
Thank you. Any other
Okay.
discussion or questions? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of approving section K, community relations on first reading, please say aye.
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 All right, and I'll abstain, so that passes. Yeah,
I'm clarifying, I believe that the ones that are highlighted red, such as KBBA-E, are because that at one point there had been a comment connected. So that document, that exhibit, as evidenced by the -E, and the next page, which is -R, meaning it's regulation, I have a little note on the bottom of the second page that says regulation should not be in policy. So I believe that is the distinction.
Okay.
Does-
Is that okay? I think that makes sense because I'm also looking at the one beneath it, the KCB, where it happens again. You're probably right.
Yes, there's comments on that as well.
great. All right, so we just passed on first reading amendments to section K, community relations. Now I would like to hear a motion that we amend section L, education agency relations, as presented on first reading.
So moved.
Motion from Member Poole and
Seconded.
Second.
from Member Sexton. Discussion on section L, education agency relations, superintendent.
There's very few changes in here. The only piece I want to highlight for the committee is LBC, Relations with Non-Public Schools. This is, should the committee need to vote on the addition of a private school in the district, our attorney recommended the added language as the steps that should be followed. So that's why that chunk of red line is there, that's added language.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions on section L? Yes, Member Deneve.
I just was hoping to confirm this process. So L is the last one, right? Oh, yes. So once we do our second reading, right around the corner, I'm sure, we're so efficient, then it goes up to be hosted by MASC, right?
Yes.
So then will be a searchable database.
Correct.
Which we can cross-search other districts and see how our policies stack up, and that opens the door for change. That's all I'm saying. I'm just,
The part I'm
Excited.
focusing on is section L is the last one. L for
Yes.
last.
I'm just planning where we're going in the future with it. Okay, wonderful. It's been such a long journey. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, Member Sexton.
You might not know the answer to this, and that's fine. Is there any precedent around what substantial changes means? Do we know, because that's in our policy now, do we know what that actually means and when we could invoke it if we wanted to?
Are you referring to a particular?
I am referring to the brand new process that our lawyers suggested we put in of private schools.
that would be driven by the legal references that are below. I am happy to confirm, but I believe that that is actually the language in the statute, but
That's fine. I can do the background reading.
if there's a additional question for clarification, I'm happy to get that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, anything else on our section 8 of our agenda, policies? Okay, and just so folks know, the process for these first reading ones, we will have a policy meeting between now and the next meeting. So if items occur to you or additional feedback or questions and you want to refer that to the policy subcommittee, you can do so, and then these items will come back to us in June for final vote. And speaking of that, at our last meeting, we approved on a first readings amendments to policy EEAA, walkers and riders. So I would hear a motion to affirm our amendment of, I'm sorry.
Can I have a quick point of order? Did we actually vote on L?
Oh, no? We did not. Oh, I apologize. In my mind, we had. All right. All those in favor of approving amendments to section L?
Aye.
All right. And I'll abstain, so the motion carries. Thank you very much. That would have been sad. All right. I would hear a motion that we amend policy EEAA, walkers and riders, as presented on second reading. A motion from the mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on this? Who? We'll say member Poole. I'm sorry. There's an Ann Poole in my life. You're Ann Childs. I don't know who Ann Poole is. I can't even tell who she is. The name's just in my head. Second from member Childs. Is there any discussion on the second reading of this policy? Hearing none. Yes. No, it's move that we amend policy EEAA, walkers and riders, as presented on second reading. Thank you. Yep. And any discussion on that motion? All right, let's have a vote. All those in favor, aye, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I will abstain. So the motion carries, and we're getting there. It's very exciting. All right, we're moving on to the request for the field behind Greenfield High School to be named Donna Woodcock Field. Superintendent.
So the Coach Mike Kacheski had reached out with the desire to have the field hockey field named after Donna Woodcock, who sadly passed away actually 1 year ago today. So it's, I think, very fitting for the committee to be hearing this today. The process in school committee policy is that we first need a written request, which we got very nicely outlined by Coach K. Then, if it is a building-specific request, which I considered this to be related to the high school, given that the field is behind the high school, it needs to go to the PTO or school council. So the school council did, in fact, vote to support Coach K's recommendation. You have in your packet Coach K's letter, and then on the back side of that same page, the minutes from the school council reflecting their support. So then the school committee policy speaks to a period of allowing for public comment. So I turn it back to the chair for the next step.
Okay, great. Well, I think first we could start if there are any comments from school committee members on this proposal. All right. So I guess I would propose that our public comment period be that we welcome feedback from the community, and perhaps we can encourage people to come to our next school committee meeting and during the public comment period if they want to provide more input on that. Does that timeline work okay?
It does, and then that would allow, it would allow us to order a plaque. If the committee votes in favor, it would allow us time for a next step prior to the close of the fiscal year.
If we vote at the next meeting?
Correct.
Great. All right, we'll plan on that. We'll have a public comment period, just our normal general public comment period, and then we'll have a public comment period, which will be a hearing on this particular item at our June meeting. Does that sound okay to everybody? All right. And any comments from the committee at this time? I understand we're just learning about this now, so if you want to make more comments next time when we discuss and vote, would welcome that discussion. All right. And excusing the superintendent for the rest of the evening, we are moving on to the superintendent evaluation training. The superintendent had her last evaluation with us last year. So as part of our transition to a new superintendent, we get to do this without you. And welcome, Liz. Why don't you? Do you want to just come right here and turn on the microphone? You just press the button. Sometimes you have to press it twice to get it to stick. And when it turns green, you know it's working. There you go.
It's almost like I'm in an alternate universe here tonight, sitting back here smiling during this meeting.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to have you back with us. It's been a long time.
Well,
We're a whole new group since the last time you were here.
since you started policy, third mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Counting the interim, the third superintendent.
That's right.
And just to sit here and hear the collegial interest and discussion is blowing me away.
Welcome to the new
you.
Greenfield School Committee.
Thank you so much for having me here. And if I do say so myself, Donna Woodcock is a field hockey legend, as my girls attended Smith Academy, and we had some incredible battles over the years. Coach Sherry Webb. While I was sitting there, I did notice computers out, and since there is no screen, I emailed everybody the presentation that I had prepared for tonight, because I only printed these teeny tiny little slides. Because it has, sometimes PowerPoints, and since this one is a little busy, I have to say, takes up a lot of space.
Liz, did you send it to me? Do you know? I'm not on the school committee link.
I will forward it around. If I got it, I'll send it.
And so this presentation really has two parts, and I found myself today 4 different times juggling the order of the slides. So I'm going to give you kind of a nuts and bolts first, and then we're going to talk about Greenfield. Now let me...
I don't know if you might want to take another second to resend, because I don't think any of us... Okay, great.
Because, I used my hotspot.
We do have Wi-Fi in the building, and I can give you the... Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Glasses on, glasses off. Okay, turn off the hotspot, Liz, first.
Actually, this is going to be a longer section. We will go past 8 o'clock in all likelihood. So why don't we, maybe not, but why don't we take a 5-minute break now?
Great.
And then we can come back fresh for our training. See you back as the clock is turning from 7:37 to 7:38 on your computer. 9:39, and we are reconvening for our Evaluating the Superintendent training with Liz LaFawn from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you again. It's very, very nice to be here. I don't know you all, but I have been involved with this district since around August of 2018. Policy was interesting. And then Christine came on board and said, you know, I think the process is going to work like this. Like, do we really need a meeting? Can you and I share a drive? Can I ask you questions? Can, you know, mark up the document? Can we communicate that way on our own time? And she just took off. Like, I'd get in
Fabulous.
a couple of days after I noticed comments in the drive, and she'd already moved on to the next section. So she's like, yeah, just call me next time. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate being here. We're going to talk about superintendent evaluation. And Karen, because I'm not the one who actually, I've been evaluated with a similar tool, but not as a licensed educator. So just jump right in if I say something that's not right. The beauty of this process is that it's something that you will talk together about and make decisions together about before you get to the. I've never
I
been.
think, yeah, when you move the mic, is it better when she moves the
Is
mic
it
away?
better?
No, there's only one microphone that's on, and then she has her laptop. But I wonder actually if you move the microphone closer to you, and if then the sound level can be reduced, then maybe we get less interference. If you can move it even a little closer, Liz, like see how I have it kind of like right in.
Like this?
Yeah, but you could move the microphone closer, but I guess you have some stuff there. But
I could move it closer.
okay,
How's that?
I think that might work better. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first few slides are going to be sort of the DESI's point of view on evaluation. It's the kind of the technical side, because that makes the most sense to start there. When DESI initially introduced their evaluation system, the rubrics was so big and so cumbersome, and it was dropped on school committees all at once, and it was such a big change from the evaluations that talked about is a good communicator, dresses well, answers questions in a timely way, that it took school committees a very, very long time to accept the changes. And by the time school committee members had clawed their way through that really cumbersome process for 3 or 4 years, DESI went through and reduced the rubric and made some recommendations that really made the process a lot easier. And then committee members really started to say, this is good, we can do this. This is what helps us to grow together, right, as a team. And this is what DESI says the evaluation system is about in that second slide. And it does the whole notion of, as I was reflecting back on this when I was putting this together, I think my favorite part of the being evaluated was doing the self-assessment piece. This is what I said I was going to do. Did I do it? If I didn't, why didn't I do it? And it was very helpful to start that way and understand how I could get better at what I was doing before I even went into my evaluator, and we had that discussion. It does link criteria in the rubric to, you know, the work that's being done, and it has descriptors that talk about what the work looks like as it's being done, if it's being done well, adequately, not so well maybe. It requires a lot of attention. So throughout the course of the year, after you've talked about goals, and we'll get into this a little more deeply, but you'll talk about goals as they tie into specific plans you have in place for the district, why these goals are important, what will be the focus, what standards will tie to the goals, and what indicators are best used to evaluate specific parts of the goals that you reach and agree upon. So not only does that require some deep attention and communication, but throughout the year, you will hear things at the school committee meetings that will be tied directly to the evaluation at the end of the year. I often suggest to people that you make a note so that people can keep a notebook, or some folks have even liked the idea of a note catcher. If there's something specific on an agenda that ties back to the evaluation and you have a note catcher and you can jot down notes about the evaluation, it's helpful to understand how that builds throughout the year and how the work you're doing here at the table ties directly to the evaluation. More on that. So Desi tells us there's these 3 key components. It's a 5-step cycle where goals are created and they're tied for the evaluation purpose to the standards outlined by Desi and the administrators, in this case the superintendent's evaluation rubric. So that 5-step cycle starts with that all-important self-assessment. And it really is an affirming process in many cases, and a good way to sort of right yourself and get back to what you, in the case of a superintendent, so my job was certainly not as intense as a superintendent's, but you constantly responding to what's happening in the moment, because we're talking about students, we're talking about staff, we're talking about other emergency situations. And sometimes it's easy to become distracted from those, maybe not the overarching sense of the goals, but the steps that you had agreed in your mind that you would take, right? And with the committee. So there's the self-assessment that brings you to goal setting. You see the self-assessment, you talk about that as you're setting the goals. You're looking at your strategic plan as you're setting goals and any other district goals or district improvement goals that you have. Once those agreements are reached, the superintendent begins to implement the goals across the district, right? To improve outcomes for students, essentially. You should have a mid-cycle check-in. Desi calls it a formative review. I like the notion of a check-in right around December or so that you can talk about, we've gotten the start of school off, we've gotten through the holidays, here's where we are. Is there a need to make any adjustments in the goals that you've set based on what's happened to date or what might be coming our way? Are any of these goals now less important than others? Do we want to shuffle the order of the priority of the goals, that kind of thing? And then from there, really the rest of the year goes on. Focus from the superintendent is on the work that has been indicated would be done. And you don't come back together again until, I don't know what your cycle is. Does it end before election time, or do you then evaluate in the summer? It's another piece you're going to agree on, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. What is the cycle? Because you have spring elections here, right? Fall elections.
Fall elections, yeah.
Perfect. So
Terms start in January.
School year. Yeah, very good. The 2-part tool, as described by Desi, involves those SMART goals that we've all heard about for many years, and how they tie to the performance rubric. In other words, what are the indicators? What are the standards and indicators that will best tell us if these goals have been accomplished and to what degree? And that rating system ensures that Desi has established, ensures that your rating on the goals and the standards that they've determined will lead to growth in leadership, improved performance as a leader in an educational system in Massachusetts. Desi loves to tell us how we do these things. In any case, I think at the end of the day, and with the changes that have happened in the evaluation system, it's a pretty good tool if you can commit to the process. And when I say if you can commit to the process, if you haven't been committing to the process, it can take a little bit of adjustment on everybody's part, right? So when you create the evaluation document with the superintendent, specifically, you're going to, the superintendent's going to bring in some draft goals based on the strategic plan. Do you have a district improvement plan? No.
That is that, but we also would be using the district prioritization plan with the SSOS team as well.
Excellent. So you already have some established documents that talk about the work that essentially needs to be done. And each year, as the superintendent drafts the goals related to the evaluation, you're prioritizing what needs to be done now, sort of do now. The plan contains more things than anybody could humanly, these plans, 3 together now, than anyone could do in 1 year. So you're prioritizing as you go. And you do that based on the draft goals that the superintendent brings in. There's a discussion. I expect that it would be a pretty robust discussion. And you reach some agreement on what the most important priorities in the district are for the superintendent to focus on. In addition to that, I guess let me back up just a minute. This work can be done either with the full committee or by a subcommittee. Larger committees sometimes create, and this is not an overly large committee, but sometimes they create a subcommittee for superintendent evaluation where 3 people will sort of meet, go over the goals, talk about what the priorities are, talk about the standards and indicators that will measure that progress. And all of that will then come back to the full board for approval, because the full board has to approve this process ultimately. Just depends on where you want to do the work. Sometimes a workshop setting with a small group like this can work quite well as also. So the superintendent ultimately gets evaluated each year against all of the 4 standards in one way or another. They tie in. There may only be 3 or 4 goals, but you will pick indicators from each of the standards to help measure the performance on those goals. Even DESE recommends that you do not use all of the indicators. You'd drive yourselves crazy if you did that. You come to agreement with the superintendent in terms of which, maybe between, depending on the number of goals you have, anywhere between 8 and 12 indicators, maybe 8 to 12 indicators, depending on how those match up to the goals and how they're going to measure the work being done. If you tie yourself to more than 12 indicators, you're spending an awful lot of time and you're going in very, very deep. Sometimes less can be more if you can find agreement and settle in on something that really is going to get to the meat of the work being done.
And Liz, can I just add, what's been helpful since I think DESE came out with them right when we came back from COVID was the focus indicators worksheet. Mm-hmm. We use it with our teachers because the EdEval process is just as lengthy and filled with minutia with the indicators and substandards with those. So it's been very helpful in aligning the work that not only administrators focus on, but then how does it trickle down to our educators? So those are always helpful.
So as we get to the Greenfield, I'm just trying to hit the highlights according to DESE here, but we'll talk about how all of the goals tie: teacher goals, administrator goals, superintendent goals, support staff goals. I'm sure you probably evaluate everybody here in the district, right? Everybody has an evaluation based on the goals of the district. So if you are a custodian, for example, and there's a buildings and a maintenance and operations goal, you might tie your work. You may only have one goal for the year, but you might tie your work to see how do I support that work going forward. In any case, getting ahead of myself there. Some committees, maybe with a mathematician on board, talk about how they might weight some of the goals, the standards differently. I'm not a mathematician, and I would never understand that as hard as you would try to explain it to me, but you can weight goals, put more significance on one goal versus another, if that's something you all agree to as well. And as you're discussing this, you're going to also talk about the artifacts and the kinds of presentations, as we mentioned earlier, that will build on, that will help you to gain an understanding throughout the course of the year about how that work is going. So I just took a snapshot of Standard 1A curriculum under instructional leadership of DESE's rubric here to introduce you to this. You'll see it again as it ties directly to Greenfield as we move along. There's the goal, which is instructional leadership. The indicator is curriculum, and in this case, there's the series of 4 descriptors that talk about how to measure the progress you've seen as it's described here. From unsatisfactory, or with a new superintendent, can be called developing, which is much more positive term to use than unsatisfactory. Developing and needs improvement, it's another thing you can talk about and agree upon. Nobody was, being a new superintendent, regardless of your experience, takes some work. Even when you have a mentor like Dr. DeBarge. I think you know that. You know what you're in for. DESE tells us that nobody's exemplary. I'm not sure what planet that DESE works from, because there are some exemplary administrators out there. Certainly not across the board, and if your administrators are getting, your superintendent's getting exemplary across the board, certainly in their first 3, 4, 5 years, you're not working hard enough together as a team. They say proficient is what we should strive for. However, I think it's extremely unrealistic to say, as that last sentence under exemplary is a model or models this practice for others. I think we're all capable of that, not across the board. So the structure of the rubric provides that continuum from the standard to the indicator to the descriptors. This is, the instrument itself takes thought to accurately measure the work, and you'll see why. Now you ask yourself, how does this really all work together? It does. And Karen knows a lot more about this than I do. So from my perspective, we start with those district goals, from which, as the superintendent begins to draft their goals for the coming year, they consider what are the most critical needs? What are our strategic priorities, or focus priorities in this case? And then goes to clarify the direction that the work will go in. What are the desired outcomes, which are going to be talked about in the goals? If this, then that, right? And as part of that process, the superintendent's engaging critical partners or stakeholders as they think through how this goal is going to play out over the course of a year. So the superintendent's goals come, as we said, from those plans that already exist, that you've already approved, that you've identified as the needs in order to continue to improve the outcomes for students in the district, which is really at the heart of all of our work. We don't do any of that work without the incredible staff, teachers and administrators Cooks, custodians, secretaries, everybody's a part of the work. And everybody in the district is thinking through their goal or goals for the year, and how they can support the work that's happening. Superintendent also needs to think about the needs of the staff while trying to support the staff in their work as they're supporting these district goals, and how to engage family and community in supporting the schools, and just simply engaging them in the schools so that they feel welcome and honored when they step in the door, whether it's central office or a school building. So step one of the process is where this group meets together and defines how the process will roll out. You've got draft goals. You'll come out of that meeting, or perhaps 2 meetings, with agreement on what the goals are and how they'll be measured, on the tool that's going to be used. I see the questions percolating. It's a lot. I'm going to just, you know what? Let me get through this slide and then I'm ready for the questions. That mid-cycle check-in, especially with a new superintendent, is key. So you all know how everything's progressing. Where's the work on this goal? Has something happened? COVID? Do we now need to shift the work that we're doing? Right? Are we tweaking a goal, or are we totally shifting the goals at this stage of the game? And then the work really continues to progress through the summative evaluation. The superintendent has the extreme pleasure of being evaluated publicly by the school committee. And I don't really mean that. That's tongue-in-cheek. I don't think I would enjoy being evaluated on television, but you know, you're a public figure now, Karen, or you will be soon. And so every individual member will complete an evaluation form. Those forms will go to someone, maybe a subcommittee, maybe the chair, to create a composite. The composite is to ensure that the strong themes are highlighted, but also to be sure that everybody's voice is heard in the composite, right? That composite is shared out with the public. At the same time, it's shared with the school committee. You'll talk about it in an open public meeting, and everyone will be so delighted with the process. This is where sometimes the difficult discussions can take place. We would always encourage you, if you have questions, to bring them to the superintendent before you come to that meeting, especially if they're the tough questions, to see if you can better understand. Maybe there's a piece that you're missing, maybe there isn't. But just so that you're not getting at this open public meeting with, you know, being broadcast out to the public. You'd be surprised how many people watch. And so that neither side is surprised. Always a good way to build a trusting relationship. So again, the outputs are those presentations you'll get at meetings. Sometimes the meetings themselves are focused on a particular topic. They will be evidence that comes from other meetings that happen within the district, or supports that are being provided in other ways. The superintendent will provide you with evidence before you complete the evaluation form, including data on student growth. Not necessarily achievement alone, but growth in other ways. You know, what kinds of programming has been offered? What has been the increase in student participation in those programs? Most talked about at Day on the Hill, AP classes. Why were AP classes only for those kids that were the top performers? It's amazing what school districts have found out when they've opened up AP to more students. How many students have blossomed, right? Students who were non-traditionally AP students, who were able to participate in AP classes that really enriched their lives. Maybe they passed the AP exam, maybe they didn't, but what difference did it make in the life of those students, right? So there's many, many things you can think about there. And all of those outputs are, again, assessed against those standards and indicators. Last line. So instructional leadership, standards, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture across the district. It's a big job. Do we want to stop for questions here, Glenn?
Sure, that'd be great.
We can stop anywhere someone wants to raise their hand and ask a question. I find that the best way to go. Nobody really likes to be talked to, so we can have a conversation as we go.
Other questions for Liz? Member Deneve?
I'm so glad you're here.
I am too.
This process, I think, has been a real pain point for this committee. In the past, we have never had, ever, a year-long agenda or school committee goals. And we've never worked as a team on creating those until recently. We have draft documents that we've lightly discussed, and hopefully we can look at those soon. But we've never worked as a team on this. So
Doesn't surprise me, given where you've come from.
yeah.
So
We had a lot of discussion about how much we hated this rubric and how awful it was, and I had a little subcommittee that didn't get off the ground of finding another rubric and looked at other things. But having you here now makes me wonder if maybe the problem was that we just never worked as a team on this. Like, we just didn't have this info, and we didn't know what we were supposed to do because we've never done any of this.
you're not alone.
So I'm wondering if we just to know, do we have to use this rubric, or can we explore other ones like a 360-degree interview process or something such as?
You can adapt the tool created by DESE. I know that there's been discussion by committees, and I'd have to check with my colleagues. I'd be quite surprised that anybody did the 360 successfully. And part of the reason for that is anyone whose input or feedback or evaluative comments that are used as part of the evaluation become public along with yours. So there's that. That's a huge piece. And that would take discussion with the superintendent and agreement on how that process would roll out. I think there's legal implications to that because of the public nature of that process. I think that if I were a committee who were doing this for the first year before, maybe we want to talk about this, but maybe we don't want to do it the first year. Maybe we want to talk about ways we can really get at the things we want to know through looking at the indicators. Maybe. Or maybe that's a good first step. But remember, you need to have agreement on how that's going to roll out. And folks who are going to participate, I know it's something that gives us at MASC all a little bit of a twitch when people say, let's do a 360 evaluation. It's something you'd want legal counsel to weigh in on. None of us are attorneys, although we do have an attorney. I'd say to this committee, work on understanding this process and grow from there. See how you can grow from there.
Okay. So then, when we create the composite, how do we share it with the public? What is that process like?
Well, it's interesting because the law describes that, and it must be made available to the public as soon as the committee gets it. So if It's email. So for example, I think best practice says provided the night of the evaluation meeting. I don't know that I think that's best practice because now you're having the meeting and you're reading the composite all at the same time. I tend to prefer the notion, if you agree on it, that you get it ahead of time. So you can ask questions. What if you have a question for the superintendent that you want to ask, right? So, but if it's emailed to you as part of your packet to get your packets electronically,
Some of them, yeah.
it should be posted on the website, the packet with that composite at the same time, so that the public can access it the same time you're accessing it.
Okay.
And if you're coming to the meeting and folks think they want to access the composite, there should be some paper copies available for them.
So then my other question is just to confirm that we should align all of these goals that we work on together and that the superintendent brings in. It should all be aligned with our year-long agenda.
Well, yes, that's what the year-long agenda is
So
for.
we have to make a year-long agenda and we have to identify district goals and priorities as a committee in concert with the superintendent, or do we create them separately and then she creates them separately and we come together?
She's bringing in her draft goals, and since we're talking about you specifically, I'll stop saying the superintendent. She'll bring in draft goals that you will discuss and you will come to agreement on. Maybe they're perfect and ready to go. Maybe they need a little tweaking. Maybe they just, need a little feedback, right? If now you're talking about the committee creating goals. So when the school committee creates goals, the notion is your work, the goals you create for yourself, the things you commit to doing, will support the work of the superintendent and the district towards achieving those district-wide overarching goals that have already been approved. So it wouldn't be like to make sure that the marching band gets new uniforms or that we put a new sidewalk in front of the high school. It would be a thoughtful process with the superintendent. How can we align our work through a yearly agenda? For example, we'll create a yearly agenda so that the superintendent can tell us when things are going to come in so we can learn about what's happening with the goals. If there's under academic leadership, instructional leadership, I heard you're using illustrative math, so let me just make something up and say you all want to understand how, or one of the goals is to support this illustrative math with professional development, watching the data, seeing how it's working, understanding how this is all rolling out in the system. You may all decide in this year-long agenda that at some point the math director or curriculum director is going to come in and give you a report on sort of benchmark data. Whatever this curriculum person decides you're going to get to learn about illustrative math. You've done, or assuming benchmark data throughout the years with the kids. What are the changes? What are you noticing? Where are you seeing the deficits? Where are you seeing the kids are doing well, right? What are the adjustments they're making because of this new program? It's to help you better understand that work, that deep and thoughtful work that's happening in the schools every day. You should be hearing from the various instructional departments about what's happening, particularly in the areas of need, right? But you also want to hear about what's going really well so that you have a good balance. So I'm going to follow up on the idea of a year-long agenda with you.
Okay.
Are you done with your questions?
Yes, I just, you just shook something in my head because I know that MASC talks about having staff presentations and you were just talking about that. And we've never had anything like that. So that, like, for example, that's something we put on our little draft goal list, having staff presentations. So that's something that it has been mentioned as maybe not in our purview as a school committee, but I feel like, is it not something we should be hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
And it's
all right.
also part of building a trusting relationship together with your CEO, right? These are never, oh, wait till this comes in. It's never about that. It's about listening to understand what's happening in the schools, right? How do you know how all this money you're spending is working if you're not hearing from various departments? And again, I'm going to look at how far you've come in such a short period of time. And so the time could be now for this, right? This was one of the nicest school committee meetings I've been to in some time. Usually people talk to us when they have a problem they want us to solve. If I had a magic wand, everybody would get along and talk and work together and assume positive intent, and I'd work myself out of a job. Do you want to acknowledge people, Glenn?
I know, feel free to acknowledge people yourself.
I don't want to not acknowledge the mayor, but Melody had her hand up.
Today is a special day. I mean, I worked for Greenfield Public Schools for 10 years,
Thank you.
okay? So 4 superintendents in 10 years.
You've seen a lot.
Change. So Karen has been here, and she knows what needs to be done. And that's why she's sitting there. We have needed curriculum work for the last 15 years, if you listen to the teachers. The last curriculum documents were written by Carol Jacobs and Buzz Nimbercow, and they're up in an attic at Federal Street Elementary School. The binders are so old, they have countries that probably don't even exist anymore. So the curriculum work that needs to be done to make our scores go up has been critical for years, and it hasn't happened because I can tell you that in my presence, in front of me, 3 different superintendents made a public statement to their principals. The reason they couldn't get the work done was because they were dealing with the school committee. So I'm going to say to you, we need to keep being positive and listen to the person who's in charge, who's going to make things happen. I think this is a special day because in this room are positive people who want to be inclusive, who can listen to parents and children and hear what needs to be done. So I'm pretty impressed with the people that I have met and that I have talked to. And there's a lot of teachers hoping for good things, and they're saying great things about this year. Christine has done a great beginning, 3 years to start it, and Karen gets to make it all happen.
Christine has really laid a solid foundation here. And over the past many months, as I've listened to and read about the staff that's been attracted here, I'm incredibly impressed. There's got to be some really good work happening in these schools for the caliber of the people that are coming here to be coming here. Not 1, not 2, not 3, like they're coming here. I just heard of 2 really strong teachers that were hired to come in here tonight. You're doing some good things, so be part of the team, right? That's going to continue to help build that. Now, your comment about listening to parents and community members, that's your job. But remember, so that's a whole nother separate conversation that we could have about roles and responsibilities and how that connects with administration, right? What we're talking about here tonight is, just to circle back, is incredibly important because it's tying to these things that you have already said are really priorities in the district. And it's something you want to keep your focus on. Those presentations from staff as they tie to your goals can be a great help to these school committee members throughout the course of the year so they can understand along with you the work that's happening. Again, I don't know that the foundation was there before now for that to start happening. And it's a presentation that you might have follow-up questions for the person presenting. You might be inquisitive to know something more. But never put that person on the spot so that others in the district, oh my gosh, don't want to come here and give a presentation. Again, we're always assuming positive intent in all the work we do. Sometimes that doesn't prove to be the case, but that's the exception rather than the rule, right? And when you've been through a tough time, sometimes shaking those feelings can take a little effort. But you've got a good team here now, and from all accounts, you've got someone that lots of folks would like to have leading their district. So you've got a lot to work with. Mayor, sorry.
Turn your mic on.
So I think there's 4 of us that are new to school committee here. Some of you have been through this before. I'll speak as someone who's new, that the first couple of months was having a lot of difficulty just with the initials of things. And so I'm tying this into the presentation part. I love, you always come with the superintendent notes and you have pictures, and I feel like that's a wonderful thing. And it really gives me an idea of what's going on. And I do feel like, just speaking for myself, I would have some trouble evaluating some things. For example, we talked about illustrative math.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking, no idea. I'm probably not the only one. But, a little something about what that would be like. That picture that you give in the pictures is a good thing. And so I just wanted to, that's a comment. And the other thing, the way this works is the superintendent comes in and the superintendent has goals. Is that I've watched some of these. I just watched part of your meetings before. It didn't seem
Yeah,
cohesive.
it's part of the process that the superintendent and the committee will work together on the superintendent's goals. So that's one key element that you're really evaluating the superintendent's progress on those goals.
And follow up. So at the beginning of the year, I'm just trying to get the calendar part of this. So now it's May, and do we meet during the summer? Does the school committee meet all year?
We do, yeah.
And so I'm sure that you've been thinking a lot about this, getting prepared. So you come up with your things, and then does the school committee get together and they have ideas too? Is that how this works?
I think the way it's worked in the past, and Karen and I can figure out together about how it might look going forward, but that the superintendent has put together draft goals for the school committee to consider, and then it's an item on the agenda, and we discuss and we vote on whether to approve their goals or whether to, modify, and so on.
And this is an authentic discussion about, this is how she sees the work, the priority work going into this particular year, right?
And this is the DESE approved one, this one that we have in front of us. This is what most committees use? Is this what most school?
Yes.
Okay,
They do,
so, sounds good to me.
the vast majority.
Okay.
Yes. And once it's not an easy process initially, but it gets easier. The first one under your belt, the second one you're not sort of like afraid of. Now you understand the process. And as you've worked together for a year and you understand the kinds of information the committee needs to get to help them through this process, year 2 gets easier. Process. It's all about process and figuring out what works best for everyone, for a deeper understanding of how it needs to roll out, the kinds of information the committee needs to get along the way. It's very difficult to get all of that whole data dump at the end of the year and evaluate someone. I'm the kind of person who likes to take notes on things. anyway. So I think that if their committee understands that perhaps someone's coming in or a report's coming in on a particular topic that's tied to one of your goals, flag that for them on an agenda and say tied to goal 3. Indicator 3C or something, right? So that as they listen, you listen for understanding, and then you reflect back on the rubric later and say, oh, this is what I heard, and this is how it ties in here. For example, what might I want to hear going forward, or what questions might I ask going forward to deepen my understanding? Were any professional, besides you, professional educators in the room? Right. So we need to work as committee members to deepen our understanding about the work that's happening in the district as a layperson. We're not experts, but we're tasked. Our key responsibilities: budget, oversight, policy making, superintendent hire and evaluation. We have a lot to learn every single time we come to these meetings. None of us comes knowing it all.
I have a question.
Yes.
So one thing that I feel like we are good at, but maybe need to keep getting better at, is being clear about what our roles are as school committee members as opposed to the superintendent.
Yes.
And part of what that means is we don't get involved in the operations of the schools.
Correct.
But then, essentially, some of these standards are kind of about how well is the superintendent operating the schools, you know. So we don't have much of a view in there sometimes, other than the artifacts and presentations that the superintendent presents. That seems, I mean, I think that, like you were saying before, there's kind of a limitation to the process where a 360 evaluation probably wouldn't work in this setting, because everybody's feedback needs to be transparent and open to the public.
That's right.
And I feel like there's another element of that maybe we just have to acknowledge is a limitation of the process, which is we don't have a ton of data on some of these things, because we're not, if we're minding our P's and Q's and staying in our role, we're not getting into all that, you know. But maybe you can speak to that.
I can. In fact, that's another conversation that we could have on another evening, right? Because I think I really love the roles and responsibilities piece.
Yeah.
And finding clarity from both sides on what that is. It makes everybody's life less stressful. But for example, the focus again is on the critical need. What are the priorities? What's been identified? Here's the goals. This is where the deep work is happening. Maybe every day, maybe not every day, because you're putting so many fires out all the time. You have a relatively small administrative staff, very qualified and capable administrative staff. But to have enough people to address everything that comes their way every single day, you couldn't afford. So the best way to afford and maintain this relationship is by building it, building trust, and creating a team, essentially. You're working together to ensure that while maybe this goal didn't get accomplished fully, and maybe it needs a lot of work, wow, but look at this goal, and look what happened here. It's always a balance. And understand that everything you do is to help move these goals forward in the district, right? Trying to think while I'm talking about something people in the community are going to talk to you. First of all, you were must-see TV for a long time, right? I'm not kidding. You were must-see TV for a long time. The best way to know that you're working as a cohesive, trusting unit, as a team, people aren't watching you anymore because you're boring.
Notice there was no one here for public comment.
And you're getting work done. Guess what? You're doing what you're supposed to do. And if you're the district that can keep, you've been here how many years? Tell me.
Who?
The truth.
I'm ending my 15th. Next September will be my 16th.
Thank you. And that doesn't happen a lot anymore in education. And you know the number one reason that people leave their districts?
The school committee?
Yes. Yes, especially administrators, but teachers feel that pinch too. They want to be in a place where it's a team atmosphere. People feel supported. They feel respected and valued. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody makes mistakes. Well, no, we all make mistakes. I make an awful lot of them myself. Guess what? I'm going to try really hard not to make the same one twice. Especially when I feel supported and valued in my efforts. The average tenure of a superintendency, I think, has dropped just below 3 years recently. 2.8, 2.6. Be the district that keeps the superintendent by creating, those rich relationships. Trust one another. Talk to one another, especially around this evaluation. You'll learn a whole lot if you're not a professional educator around this evaluation process as to what's happening in the district, the important work. Community members, parents, angry parents especially, are going to call you. I was a school committee member for 10 years. I made it a point to call the schools on the regular to tell them what I was happy about, because I never heard from anybody who was happy. Yet there's good work happening all the time. Don't ignore that. Anyway, enough of my pontificating. I think it's important when you're working together with anyone, it doesn't matter if it's a partner, if it's your children, when they're young, when they're grown, your grandchildren now, the highlight of my life. Be vulnerable sometimes, right? Nobody's always right. Okay, back to superintendent evaluation, okay? All right. So you're gonna agree on the goals. I'm gonna get back to the slideshow so I can see what I'm reading. In Greenfield, again, just to sort of come back to where I was, you're gonna agree on goals the superintendent brings to you as a draft. And as you do that, you're thinking about what outcomes, what outputs will these goals bring to Greenfield? How are they going to benefit the schools, the students, right? At the same time, you're going to agree on those applicable indicators from the rubric. So what are we measuring? What's most important for us to measure here? Don't overdo it on the indicators. Some of the work's very important. The superintendent will have an idea of what rubric, what indicator descriptor will best measure, indicator will best measure the work. So listen, be thoughtful, but also look through those indicators to see if there's something else that intrigues you, that you want to have that open conversation about. If there's some area needing special attention, have the discussion about, is there a goal that we want to weight a little stronger than another? Maybe that's something you want to get through 1 year before you think about that and build that relationship with your new superintendent. Or maybe you're ready to roll. Maybe the superintendent's ready to roll with it, but have that conversation. You want to discuss the kind of evidence you're going to get and how you're going to get it. Will you see some presentations from curriculum leaders, from principals? Will you get reports? Will you use these superintendent reports? Start putting those in a folder called Superintendent Evaluation, right? So that you can go back and reflect on things you heard on a regular basis from the superintendent. Don't wait until the end of the year until you get something like this that you're weeding through while you're trying to answer those questions. Create that ever important year-long agenda So you can get to hearing about those things that are important, that are highlighted as a superintendent's goal. So there's district goals. There's not a graphic in here. There's the district goals through the various plans that you have that have been identified, the focused priority areas. Superintendent builds goals on that. All the administrators in the district, including principals, build goals on those plans. The school improvement plans are built from those goals. Teachers build their goals based on the improvement that the school improvement plans say that the schools are going to make. Everybody's goals originate in the same place, and they're all for the same purpose. So we're all working in the same direction and not at odds with one another. So you will, again, I love the mid-year check-in, and it's just a temperature taking. It's not a really deep, detailed, we're going to dig in right here. Checking the temperature. Superintendent's going to tell you how it's going, how the work is progressing. You're going to ask, what can we do to assist you? What can we do to further your progress on these goals? How does our work help you? So that, again, then everything kind of goes away, and the end of the year holidays come, and you get through the MCAS and testing and graduations, and then after you've forgotten about evaluation, now it's summative evaluation time. But if you've been thinking from the beginning of the process and keeping a folder or notebook or however, saving a file on your computer, however you do this, keep track of things that you want to refer back to later. Things that you look at, like those reports tonight, and say, wow, this was really informative to me. Scan it in your computer and save it somewhere. Drop it in the drive. So when the composite evaluation is completed at the end of the year, the chair typically will do that, or a designee. Maybe it's a vice chair, maybe it's another member of the committee who already has deep experience in that area. Maybe it's a subcommittee that you've decided will do the composite for fairness. But discuss that early on in the process so you know how it's going to be done. And vote on it. Most importantly, seal it, right? Take a vote so everybody knows how it's going to be done. The composite is important. There are going to be varying comments. There's going to be themes, first of all. That's the good news. There will be themes. And then there'll be sort of those comments on one end of the spectrum or the other. It's inevitable. It happens. We're all human. But the composite is designed so that not all comments are included, but that everyone's voice is included, right? So maybe it's the theme that's highlighted and not a particular comment. Some people love to see their own words, not only in evaluations, but in minutes. Not what minutes are for either, right? Minutes are summaries. That's what the composite is for. You want to know about the themes. You want to know the highlights and the lowlights.
Ask a question, Liz.
Yes, please.
So what if there's a comment in kind of the raw data from the evaluation that really is not in keeping with the evaluation, or might be, inappropriate in some way? Like, how is that handled?
So if, number one, if it is not tied to the goals or keeping with those standards and indicators that you've said you're measuring, it doesn't belong in the composite. But as chair, I would want to talk to that member and find out, sort of what's behind it. Where can we work on whatever this is, good, bad, or indifferent?
Thank you.
You have a lot of responsibility, Glenn.
Okay. I think I can handle it, but we'll see.
I do too. So I have a quick question. I don't remember which superintendent did it, but it worked really well with this document. Was an email, like a little survey was sent to all of us, and it was, you just answered like so many questions, and then it went back to the superintendent to give them feedback about their performance. And it was really simple. I know we did it as principals, and I assumed it also went to school committee members. But is that, like, it wasn't public, it was just something like a check-in? You know, the mid-year review is always kind of like, it feels like as an evaluator, I do the mid-year review, and I always said the state is like behind. Like, Christmas is here, and you're all of a sudden like, doing all this, and then you feel like you've just gone through all of this stuff and you're hit with the summative. That the mid-year is not really mid-year. Mid-year is like a month before, where you you can see the growth, you can see it happen.
Right.
So is it possible? I'm just thinking that to collect, so that the feedback is given through a different method.
You would agree on that early on with the superintendent?
Yeah, and privately. I mean, that's the thing about all of this is the public piece is just, to me, offensive. I mean, this is really like
Offensive.
It is.
I wouldn't want to be
Exactly.
evaluated
Yeah.
publicly.
So I think, you know, to seek feedback is to me is a good thing. It's reflective. I mean, that's the piece that really isn't as much in the superintendent as it is in the teachers, where they're asked to reflect more.
Yeah, there's more observations
Exactly.
and reflections. So that's why I call the mid-year a temperature taking. I
Okay.
don't know if the superintendent wants to think forward about
Yeah.
that and whether there might be some sort of check-in along the way. So the work that's done on teacher evaluations is quite a bit different. Because you're talking about individual classrooms and the growth
Right.
among a number of students in those classrooms. But I'm glad you've done that work. How many teachers did you have to evaluate?
Depended on the year, a lot.
A lot.
And a lot of first-year teachers.
Right.
Thank you, pandemic.
And so to your question, that's something you want to talk about in that initial meeting, whether it's handled by a subcommittee, but it'll eventually get to the school committee, or if the full school committee does this. If we have comments that are outside of the structure of the evaluation, which is based on the goals, it's not pertinent to the evaluation. You know, have that conversation so people understand ahead of time, and they're more thoughtful when they're completing the evaluation. Right? Let me keep my focus. And if there's this comment I want to make, my best advice to anybody here is to have, meet with the superintendent, have coffee every couple of weeks, once a month. I don't know. Find a way to have that chat. You probably meet on a regular basis with the superintendent. Don't be intrusive. There's a ton of work going on. But you should know one another and each other how to best support one another.
I think that's a really good point, that there are comments and questions that school committee members might have that just basically lie outside the scope of the evaluation, but they're still valid and important conversations that can be had.
That's on you, Glenn. But they are valid and important conversations.
Yeah.
So people want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want their input to be valued. So, you're in a position to honor that. You are a good person to do that. Your kids, have you ever had teenagers? Anybody have teenagers? Middle schoolers? Right. Listen, you still have to talk with them. Ultimately, you'll raise good human beings if you do. Just think of it that way. Sorry, not sorry, but it's all part of the process. Sometimes we all get a little, for whatever reason, we've got to be heard. We want to be heard. We want to talk through it. Sometimes I think always the difficult conversations help us grow. Question. Sorry, I'm taking up way too much of your time, but I could sit here and talk about this
Well, I want to say
for a
that
long time.
I think it's incredibly valuable, and I'm not worried about like getting through all of it. I think there will be a point where we start to fade, and I welcome members to let me know when you're hitting that point. But we may need to ask if you could come back another time also. But just looking around, like I see people seem to be getting a lot out of this. So thank you so much.
So I took a look at Christine's strategic priority goal 1, for example, and I don't know what number slide this is because for some reason, slide 14. Instructional leadership goal, provide administrators with support for review of data and implementation of best practice to provide all students with access to high quality instruction. Was her student learning goal. The indicator from the rubric was 1B, 2 of them, and 2C. So from 2 different standards. So the one of the agreed upon indicators was to provide feedback to administrators following review of practice and artifacts to ensure that the principals are identifying and promoting effective instructional practice. So the superintendent is spending time with administrators to ensure that they're effectively evaluating their staff members and discussing how. Where I want to see the artifacts, I want to see the feedback you're providing. And if it goes deeper than just this feedback, I want to know what you're doing. How have you documented it? 2C, family and community engagement is C. Use multiple sources of data related to student performance to identify areas of strength and need. Create a plan to improve areas of need. You might be horrified at the amount of time your staff spends breaking down data. Right? Am I wrong? Individual student data. Where are Liz's strengths? Where are her weaknesses? If this is a weakness, how are we going to address it? If this is a strength, how can we best use it to help others in the classroom? For every single student in the classroom. Superintendent is oftentimes in on these things, or reviews with principals why it's happened, what they've learned from it, right? I'm glad that you're sitting here and you can help with those pieces, because these half days, they're either sitting in professional development and they're learning strategies, or they're pulling apart data piece by piece, question by question, student by student, to determine how to be more effective educators. So then you look across at 2C, which is the indicator from the rubric, and look at the descriptions about what that performance looks like in each of the 4 categories. And it's only something you get better at by doing it authentically. Here's the DESE rubric on the next slide. So 1B, I guess I've highlighted, which was meeting with the principals to ensure that they're collecting the correct artifacts. You read the descriptors and you say, okay, all right, I can see that the superintendent, for example, is monitoring and supporting principals and instructional staff to ensure that these practices are taking place. That looks pretty proficient to me, or something other than that. I think DESE has made it much easier for us once we understand what we're looking at and why, how to evaluate the work that's actually happening. And because we're getting to the end here, does anybody have any questions on that so far? You've done it hundreds of times. You don't have questions on it. You could be leading this. DESE has done us, everybody, I don't say this about DESE much, and if you know me, you know that's true. DESE has essentially done us a pretty good favor with this in terms of we're not making it up from our own opinions in terms of how we think or feel the superintendent's performing. It's very clear how we measure it. And we have some resources on our website that will help you. There are some recordings, I think, of previous learning lunches up there about superintendent eval by different field directors. But I will tell you again, and I'm not often complimentary, but DESE has some fantastic resources, including video series on how to evaluate that I've looked at many times myself, and I've learned something each time. It's hard to take it all in at once until you start the work. And believe it or not, Glenn, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, but that's sort of where I'm coming with this. I think the key to this is understanding you are one member of a team. Your mission, the work that you're doing is the most important work, sorry, Mayor, being done in this town, because it is city. It's to educate the students who are all of our futures, right? Sorry, Mayor, I'm a strong proponent of really educating all of our kids to the very best we can. If we only had all the money in the world, which we don't, teachers would be paid like professional athletes, because as we heard at the State House, with teachers, all professions are possible, right? They're the people who make all professions possible. And we all can think about teachers who've helped us get to where we are. And so the work that you're doing is more than just sitting at board meetings talking about finances. It has a deeper meaning.
Thank you so much, Liz. Are there final questions, or could we have a brief discussion, I guess, about what do members see as next steps, or is there more you want to learn at future meetings on this topic?
I think one of the things that I would be interested in, even as a retired person, is like, and Karen's, I know you are organized, a calendar, like with all the events that are going on in the schools, because to me, that's the indicators right there. We can go see, like, graduation, absolutely, but things that are happening after school, there really isn't the central calendar. I mean, and I can even say as a principal, I was bad about it, making sure it got on the central calendar. But even the newsletters, like I picked out some things that were happening on the newsletter that I would go to and see it. And Glenn was an amazing school committee member who came to my school, and we always appreciated that because it meant he cared about what was happening in the schools. We never felt threatened. We always felt appreciated. And I think that's what we all want to do, is make people feel appreciated. So some calendar, and I don't know if that can just come from if we got all the newsletters, and there were some in this packet, but not all, that have those things that are happening, so that we can be part of that and attend them. I know everybody's interested in doing that. We want to be seen so that we can hear what we need to hear. And they also could be, even if there's something special you think is an indicator. Okay, don't get crazy as an English teacher and write a bunch of stuff. So
I'm hearing two items, like,
yeah.
on the one hand, I think kind of off the topic of superintendent evaluation, nice for the school committee to know about events and be able to attend things. But you're talking about the calendar in regard to the superintendent evaluation as like an artifact to show some of the things that are happening. Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Somebody in central office may already have at least the beginnings of such a calendar and may not be thinking about sharing it. But you're right, open houses, like the student reps were saying, sporting events. Just remember, if you want to visit a school during the day while they're functioning, that always goes through the superintendent, right?
Other questions or other thoughts about next steps or more needs around learning about the superintendent evaluation process? Member Sexton?
I don't know if it's a need, but I am really looking forward to whatever session we have where we actually set out the rules of engagement that we would like to agree upon with each other and have this process question. And I'm thinking, for your sake, that should probably be a session where we suspend the normal rules of order, so we can actually have a real conversation about it when we get there.
Yeah, we could. We could have that conversation. I could kind of gather people's thoughts and then come back with the proposal for a process at a future meeting or something like that. Could be a way to go. One thing I'm wondering, because I think part of the reason for this was, like, as Member Deneve mentioned, there was a committee that was kind of working on the evaluation tool itself. And I wonder if people are with me. Where I am with this is very much kind of what Liz was saying, is like, we're learning this process, we're learning about the rubric together, and we have a tool that's in place that will be in place when Karen begins. So maybe maybe we think about like trying it for this next cycle with our existing tool with some more training and information, and then seeing if there is a need to change the tool, or if the problem was more that we need to increase our ability to collaborate together as a school committee with the superintendent and have a deeper knowledge of what you presented tonight. So that's kind of where I am. Are other people seeing it differently, Mayor?
I just want to say, listening to this, I think this is a different group, and I think this sounds like a very good tool. And I just look around the room and I see everybody is very cooperative and wants to work together. I'm for trying this because it sounds tried and true throughout many school districts as opposed to a different one. We seem to all talk and listen.
Just remember, Glenn, the new superintendent needs to agree to the tool.
That's right, and I think she has agreed to our existing tool, basically. So that's part of her contract. If we wanted to change that mid-contract, we would need Karen's agreement on that. Right, so it wouldn't just be, oh, do we want to change it? It would be, can we get Karen on board with the idea that a change is needed as well?
Correct.
And if I could just weigh in as someone who's evaluated hundreds of people using a DESI tool that at first glance seems overwhelming and cumbersome, I really have enjoyed DESI's focus indicators, which I know we will agree upon goals, but when you have your sites specifically fine-tuned in on specific indicators that we really believe together are going to be the best to move student growth and achievement, I think it makes the rubric less overwhelming, because then you aren't having to deal with 300 indicators and all of these different areas, but they really are the ones that we've agreed upon are most important for our students right now. So I think that's part of what's made those focus indicators even better for EdEval for our teaching staff, and having us have that waterfall of the district admin is doing this, the building admin is doing this, the staff in the buildings are doing this, and it's really collaborated the efforts about where we're all rowing in the same direction because the focus is on that.
Exactly.
I have a timeline question. So when is it that we plan on setting the goals and selecting the indicators? When does that usually happen, and when will it be happening for you since you're new superintendent in just a couple of weeks?
I would presume, wasn't thinking it's that fast, slow down. No, I would think that Glenn and I could talk about that, but for the teachers process, your self-assessment is in September, draft goals are in October, agreement on those goals is November, formative happens in January, summative in May. So I would think there would be some similar sense to that, but certainly a conversation Glenn and I can think about.
Yeah, maybe for the June meeting, we could come with like kind of a draft timeline to share with the committee and get your feedback on it. And I would love to learn more about the focus areas you're referring to, Karen, so maybe we could have a presentation on that as well.
Sure. I don't believe they're out for next year, but I can bring 2023s that we used this year with our educators and administrators.
That would be great.
It's a great way to kick off your focus.
Okay, great.
Speaking of focuses, yes.
Nice. Any other comments or questions or thoughts about next steps? Member Deneve.
When you're bringing this all together in June, can you also include our process of making the year-long agenda? Since if we're starting it at the beginning of our year, which is really summer, it would fit in maybe nicely, and then we would really know what we have ahead of us.
Great, year-long agenda, school committee year-long agenda item in June as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's a lot less intimidating than it sounds, Glenn.
Okay, that's good. So, I mean, I've heard about it before, but.
And I guess just remember, like anything else in this field, there would likely be the opportunity to have to shift things as the work moves forward. But it provides staff too with good notice if they need anything to be ready, and you know, that's planned thoughtfully in terms of all the other things that are happening in the schools. So do it once, you're an old hat.
And if you could share with me some exemplars, Liz, of other committees,
I'll have to look those up.
that'd
Yep.
be great. Thank you. Any other next steps people see from this conversation? All right, thank you very much, Liz, so much for coming and being so generous with your time and your knowledge. The bad old days.
Thanks, Liz.
Anytime there's a question, call, text, email, me, any one of my colleagues, we're all happy to answer. Okay? Well, this is the most, again, sorry, this has been my passion, but this is the most important work anyone can do, right? You're preparing young people to really lead our futures. So, that's how I look at it.
Thank you. Good night. All right. I guess I would encourage members to note the hour as we move through the rest of the agenda item, and feel free to make motions to table things as you think would be best serve yourself in your bedtime tonight. So we're on to Day on the Hill, report back, and next steps. Member Deneve.
All right. This will serve also as my report for legislative representative. So you could take that number 9 off the back for our bedtime.
Great.
All right, I'll try to read quickly, but not too quickly. On May 6th, we attended the MASC Day on the Hill event. We prepared for this event with a meeting in March and in April with our Division 5 leader, Humaira Fasudin and Jason Frazier. We created a collaboration between districts here in Western Massachusetts. Those districts were Ludlow, Sunderland, Gill Montague, Hadley, and Mohawk. We had meetings with Senator Oliveira, Senator Jason Lewis, who is the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Education, Representative Oltrino, who is the House Vice Chair of Joint Education Committee, Senator Eldridge, Ian O'Neill, the Education Analyst for the Senate Ways and Means Committee, along with Senator Paul Mark, and an unexpected meeting with Senator Hewitt. We also have Zoom meetings scheduled for next week with Representative Whips and Representative Sabadosa, who were not at the State House on that day. What we focused on was rural aid that needs to be fully funded at $60 million rather than the $15 million presented in the governor's budget. This was cut to $7.5 million by the House Ways and Means, but as of just recently, like last night, Senate Ways and Means moved rural schools funding back to $15 million, and there are amendments being sought for increase. We also discussed the implicit price deflator of 1.35% that more fully reflects actual inflation of 4.5%. This is something that we didn't know if we would be able to affect very much in FY25, but people are filing to make the change for FY26 with some catch-up provisions. So far, there hasn't been any movement on this as of last night, but this is something that we discussed in all of our meetings. We also discussed the per pupil minimum proposed at $104 by the House Ways and Means, and they did put an amendment on the floor for $200 per pupil minimum. MASC would like to see $100 be the minimum moving forward in next fiscal cycles, and as of last night, the Senate Ways and Means concurred and $104 minimum has passed. We also discussed regional transportation issues and special education transportation issues. And we also discussed setting the circuit breaker at 75% for both tuition and transportation costs, as some transportation costs are now higher than tuition costs for out-of-district special education. And as of last night, the Senate Ways and Means included language to reimburse out-of-district special ed transportation at 75%. There were also a number of other bills that MASC identified. Since it's late at night, you'll probably all get these things in the mail. If you get the little handouts, you can read about them and what they do, but I'm happy to put something together and send them off in an email for your information. But some of the next steps that we identified as a group were that the legislators feel that May is too late to make a really effective change. In some of the meetings, we were watching the budget go down the hallway as we're talking about the change we wanted to make. So we are suggesting that we continue to build this multi-district coalition, but starting in the fall and having virtual or in-person meetings with legislators quarterly. Next year is the beginning of a new legislative session, and so that will be time to identify and bring our priorities to the table. And the few legislators that we discussed this with thought that that was a good idea. So hopefully we can start to create a little bit of a schedule to be in their faces earlier and more regularly. We were also approached about earmarks again, and we were given an unexpected crash course on how to do them properly. So an important next step is to identify what Greenfield needs and have that info ready, approved, and collected so that requests can be submitted right away. So that's something that we should really get right on. And that's what we did. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I hope to all see you there next year, and hopefully we can bring along some teachers and some students because it is available to them as well.
Questions or comments for Elizabeth?
That was excellent. That was a good job. I think that's really wise, and I would just put in a little FYI. If you're doing this again for the fall, if you write to Janine, because I never can get to my other email, I'll try to get on my schedule too, because I think it would be important for me to go to some of those where we're meeting with the legislators.
Oh, absolutely.
I like to be 3 days in before I get to the school one, but just, okay. I know Stacy knows to write to the other one, but I'm quite interested and impressed. Thank you, whoever went. Who went? Who went to the Days on the Hill? You went, and you went?
And Kate.
Okay, thank you for going, because I think that's what's going to make a difference is people advocating. It's a squeaky wheel that gets the oil, and it's a lot of work to do all the preparation and go all the way there, so I'm grateful on behalf of the people here.
It was a ton of work, and I really do appreciate it. Your leadership in particular, Member Deneve, kind of breathing life into our legislative advocacy, which has been dormant since before I got here, so many.
You're very welcome, and it was nice to see them sort of really excited to see so many of us packed into their offices. We took all the seats and then some, and I think that made a real big difference to see a group from Western Massachusetts targeted on top of it from all the different districts lended a lot of weight.
Absolutely. And if there are already items where we could put them together as a resolution that the school committee could vote on, so it's really the voice of the whole school committee, the power of us voting on things like that, I think would be great. So as soon as you have any items ready, we can get them on an agenda.
No problem. I'll send them all to you.
Just one last thing. I was asked for those earmarks with our delegation for things for the city, and I wouldn't want to step on your toes, Karen. But if we're talking to them and you have lists of things that you need, maybe you'll put some things together. They told me things from 50 to 100,000, and I put a bunch of them, and then I told them about the fire truck that was $2.5 million, but we did get one of the things. And I was very pleased with their advocacy. I made that list of things up myself, but as soon as they asked for it, I wrote it right away. But that would not be within my purview, or I wouldn't think any of us. So if you had some thoughts, it sounds like people are going to be going meeting, so thank you.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the coordination between the city and the schools, and between the school committee, legislative advocacy, and the district's administration and the mayor, and trying to really all be working in harmony with each other. Yeah, which is tricky to do, because sometimes you get a rep who's just like, what do you need?
Yeah, it's very fast. All of a sudden, they're like, okay, give me your stuff. And I'm like, I need to talk to this person, and it might take a week. And they're like, well, we're done. So having something ready and maybe having it pre-written out and being, if you want to empower me to hand those things off, I could facilitate that when it falls in your lap, which is exactly how it happens, unexpectedly at random moments. So it's hard to not, it feels frustrating to not be ready, and I want to be ready to facilitate whatever you guys need.
Yeah, and without Christine here, I'll just double check with her tomorrow, but I do believe she had talked to Joe Comerford on earmarks and that conversation. So I'll just follow up to see what the content of that conversation was, so I know what, if anything, was asked for.
Thank you. Any other next steps on Day on the Hill? Great. All right. So the next item is subcommittees and representatives, and I don't have in your packet the proposal for the assignments for the subcommittees with our new member. It's very not complex. I just put Member Goodwin's name in where Member Proietti's name was, which means that the new assignment would be Member Goodwin to Policy and Program Subcommittee to be the representative to the Collaborative for Educational Services and to be the representative to the District Wellness Committee. So I would love a motion to approve the revised subcommittee and representative assignments dated May 2024 as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, a motion from Member Sexton and a second from Member Childs. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Looks unanimous. I will abstain. So welcome to the Policy and Program Subcommittee, Member Goodwin. Great to have you on board, and I'm sure the collaborative and...
Can someone tell me who made the motion again? Sorry.
Member Sexton?
Okay. And who seconded? Sorry.
Member Childs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that passed. And then the next item is one item in our policy says that all of us will be presented with the functions and duties of each subcommittee, and I have made a good start on that. Maybe you'd say a good start. I've got a lot of feedback to incorporate from Christine and Karen before it's ready to bring to you. So that'll have to wait another month. But I think, just given the conversations that are happening by a shared document on Google Drive between me, Christine, and Karen, it's becoming clear that these functions and duty descriptions are a little bit overdue, and I think will be a useful tool for us in sticking within our roles in these different subcommittees. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, if people have thoughts about your committee and what kind of scope you would like to see or what functions you envision for yourself, please feel free to share those with me. Any questions on all of that? Okay. Great. Now we're on to school committee reports. Report of the chair. I will just say really pleased with the training tonight. I think that was one of the big strategic things that we wanted to do this year, and really grateful for Liz for coming and for the work that was done to coordinate all of that. So from the administration. So thank you all very much. So we'll move on to report of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee. Member Martini, do you want to give a report?
Yes, so Budget and Finance had a meeting on May 1st, and the items covered were an update on FY25 budget and also an annual budget calendar for the school committee. And to sum up, Dr. DeBarge provided a summary of discussion that took place her presentation to the City Council Ways and Means Committee, at which she answered questions along the lines of items about staff changes, line item fluctuations, the church parking lot rental, and Christine, you had made a comment. You wondered if you talked too long, but I have watched that meeting and I thought you did a great job.
We'll pass that along to her. Christine left before the superintendent evaluation presentation.
Okay. Sorry, I must have missed that piece. In any case, following that, she provided, alongside Andy, an update in regards to the FY25 budget. So to put it in a very small nutshell, essentially, as you all know, the mayor recommended a 4% budget increase rather than the 5.86. That was voted by the school committee, which results in a $400,000 difference. And fortunately, we will be able to make up most of that because of a billing issue with the bus company, through which we will have a substantial credit, as well as using some of our special education revolving. And as a result of that, we will be, provided that the City Council goes ahead and appropriates the amount of money proposed by the mayor, we should be able to avoid losing staff. And following that discussion, we talked about an annual budget calendar. This is something that many school committees around the Commonwealth have, and something that I have learned about through other trainings provided by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Attended previously, and we began a discussion about developing one for Greenfield. This is not something that we have had up to now, and so we began with reviewing samples from other school committees around the Commonwealth, and I would encourage anybody interested in this topic to go on the website and take a look through the meeting materials for that May 1st meeting so that you can see what I am talking about. We were able to go over themes that could be pulled out from this set of examples from other committees, and those themes relate to timeframes for important parts of the budget development cycle, such as, for example, when school committees adopt their annual budget calendar, which usually takes place at the beginning of the school year, and then important points along the way, such as when capital improvement project requests are in, when budget instructions and forms are distributed to leadership, and when they're due back and are reviewed with administration, and when a review of the FY next budget development is provided to the school committee so that the committee can identify its budget priorities within that. And then, of course, come all of the annual items that most people think of as budget season, such as a preliminary budget presentation to the subcommittee, and then to the school committee, and a posting, and a public hearing, and a vote by the school committee, and presentation to city council. So what is evident from looking at many examples from committees around the Commonwealth is that there's a purpose to having an annual budget calendar for the committee, and also for, I think, the public. For the committee, the idea is to help us to take a more organized approach to our responsibility in regards to the budget as one of the three main roles of the school committee. And for the public, you will see that there is alignment of committee timeframes alongside administration, the city, and the state, so that a person can have an at-a-glance view of a comprehensive, big picture understanding of budget development. And so we had a good discussion about this, and the next step will be to develop a preliminary draft of a budget calendar for Greenfield School Committee. So I would encourage anyone, like I said, interested to go ahead and take a look at the materials that were posted, and please feel free to share your feedback.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm impressed. Okay, any questions or comments from the committee? Not seeing any. Thank you so much, Member Martini.
Thank you.
The Policy and Program Subcommittee, our work is visible to you on the agenda that we did tonight. There is not more, I don't think, at this moment, but if there are policies you have questions about or want us to take a fresh look at, certainly let us know. We could put it on one of our agendas. The Executive Subcommittee did not meet. Redistricting and Reorganizing Ad Hoc Committee
We also did not meet.
did not meet. Did the School Committee Handbook Ad Hoc Committee meet?
We did not meet, but I'll be polling for a meeting in June.
Great. Okay. And we approved the contract tonight, so thank you very much, Member Sexton, for your hard work on that bargaining committee. And our collaborative representative position was vacant this month, so we don't have anything on that. City Planning and Construction Rep.
The regularly scheduled May meeting, is next Tuesday.
Okay, wonderful. We've had our legislative report, our mask report, and the district wellness rep was vacant as well this month. So I think we can move on to adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Ah, excellent.
Second.
All right.
Who was the second? Melody?
Member Goodwin. Okay. All right. All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. I won't abstain from that one. We are adjourned at, what time is it? My glasses.
9:22.
9:22 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
That's the longest one we've had.